Okay, I'm good.
Right, let's see if we can do. Yeah, we're right. Hello,
Yeah.
everyone, and welcome to my new show, Out of Nowhere. Well, my special guest today is Dan Arara. Dan is a published author of 4 books, UFO experiencer, and a researcher, a drummer, and a longtime member of MUFON in Los Angeles. Can we please welcome Dan to the show? Hello there.
Hi, hi, Bob. How are you? Nice to be here. Thank
I'm
you.
good. Well, that's great. Um, can you can you please tell us a little bit about your 40 years in Hollywood?
Yeah, it's been 40 years. It went by pretty quickly. Um, I came to California in 1980 from New Jersey, from the New Jersey shore. I grew up in Asbury Park, New Jersey. It's about an hour south of Manhattan. Quick story, when I was in high school in the early 70s, I worked with Bruce Springsteen before he was famous at a at a concert hall he used to play at, and I used to help him with his stage crew and his stage lighting. So that's a kind of an interesting story from 1973. So I grew up on the Jersey Shore. I went to Boston University. After college, I worked at Columbia Pictures in Manhattan in the PR department. And then I had some friends who had just moved to Los Angeles in 1980, and they invited me to come visit in the fall. And my father said, "Why don't you just go move to Los Angeles?" I said, "Oh, okay." I had no plan. I had no plan of attack. I had no money, no car, no connections. I just said, "Oh, okay, I guess I'll go to LA." So I've been here 43 years. Um,
My
First
God.
couple of years, it took a while. The first few years, it took a while to get established here. But in the start of 1982, I got a job at the American Film Institute. And then from there, I got a job at the Playboy Channel, of all things. I was the first publicist.
Oh my God.
So
I bet that was
uh,
interesting.
it not only was it interesting, Bob, I had just gotten married. So my timing was could not have been, I was going to parties at the Hugh Hefner mansion and surrounded by naked girls for 2.5 years. And I just got married, so my timing could not have been worse. But that's a whole nother story. After that, I got a job at Columbia Pictures in Burbank Studios in Burbank. And then after that, I had PR jobs, 2 very big PR firms. I was a senior vice president there for 10 years. During that time, I worked with Jay Leno. You probably know who Jay Leno is, the
Oh yeah, I
comedian.
do. Yeah, Jay. Oh yeah.
I worked with him when he just first got the Tonight Show. I was his publicist for a while. Really nice guy. He's very funny and very sweet. And I still bump into him every so often. And then I turned 40 in 1996, and I decided it was time for me to launch my own PR agency, Asbury PR Agency, it's called, because I'm from Asbury Park. And so my own company is 26 or 27 years, and it's been quite a run. I've worked with a lot of very famous people, and I've worked at some very big red carpet events here in Hollywood over the years. And I wrote a book, Bob. It came out last year. My first book is called Flirting with Fame. A Hollywood publicist
Ooh.
recalls 50 years of celebrity close encounters. That came out last year. And that's the history of my career with a lot of very, very famous people. And you can see some of the photos in the background there of me with some celebrities.
Yeah. You got an interesting life up to press, haven't you?
My life has been very, very unusual. That's for sure. A lot of people tell me that. I came out here with I came out to LA with $2,000. 2 months later, I had $6 and no job and no income, and somehow I managed to survive. I have 2 children. I have worked with almost every famous person you could think of, and I've had quite an interesting time.
Brilliant, brilliant. I understand you are 3 times UFO experiencer. Can you describe your 3 encounters for us, please?
Sure, sure. The first time I saw something unusual in the sky was March 1970. I was with my father near Asbury Park, New Jersey. My dad picked me up from school, and it was maybe 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. March 1970. I was not even 14 years old. And as we're driving home, we saw in the sky a big, giant silver V, letter V, like Victor, craft, giant
Yeah.
V craft in the sky. And it was hovering right over my father's car. It was maybe 200 feet above my father's car. It wasn't moving. It made no sound. It had no propellers. There was no exhaust, nothing like that. So I said, Dad, look up, look, Dad, look, there's a UFO. Stop the car, there's a UFO. So my dad pulled his car off to the side of the road. Let me kill this. And we got out of the car, and I'm jumping up and down, Bob. I'm like, oh, Dad, look at that. What is that? What is that? This huge silver V thing was up there. And my dad looked at it like he was bored. He looked at it like couldn't care less. Like in retrospect, I believe that he knew what it was. He just looked at it like no big deal. Then we went home. I called my local newspaper. I told them I just saw something. They said, "Oh, Sonny, I'm sorry, I can't talk to you now. We're getting hundreds of phone calls about this." So this wasn't not my imagination. That event really happened. So keep that in mind. That was 1970. Then the second one I saw was in 1996. My son, I had gotten divorced by that point. I had 2 young kids. And they lived out in Lancaster, California, which is near Edwards Air Force Base, about an hour and a half east of Los Angeles, northeast. And my son was turned 8, and he wanted a telescope for his birthday. So I got him a telescope, and we were looking at the sky. This would have been May 96. And we saw, Venus and Mars and the moon and all the great things you see with the telescope. And as we were about to go back in the house, we saw a very bright off-white color, egg-shaped craft in the far right-hand corner of the sky. And it slowly but steadily moved across the entirety of the sky, Bob, from the right part of the sky all the way across in a straight line to the left. And as it was traveling, I told my son, I said, look, there's a satellite. That's a satellite, clearly. And then it stopped. It stopped in place for about 30 seconds. And I thought, oh my God, that satellite's going to fall to Earth. Something happened. Something went wrong. So it stopped in place. And then it went all the way back where it came from. Same straight line. And I thought, wow, that's not a satellite. It's not a meteor or a comet. It's not a plane. It's not a helicopter. It's not a rocket. That's not normal. It's not human. And it's not. It's clearly something extraordinary. Now, keep in mind, that was near Edwards Air Force Base, and people have since told me that was probably a military UFO that they were testing, which makes
one
sense.
of ours.
That makes sense. I would have believed that one. The third and last UFO I ever saw was in 2008. Do you know the name James Gilliland? Do you know who James Gilliland is?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
So James has a branch called ECETI, E-C-E-T-I, in Washington State. It's at the base of Mount Adams. And in summer of 2008, a girlfriend of mine and I went for a 3-day weekend. He had UFO seminars and lectures and things during the day on his property. And then at night, we skywatched at night. So the first day was a Friday. And I think Nick Pope was there. I remember William Henry was there. Different guest speakers were talking. They were showing films and slides and documentary films and things. Really great stuff. Pyramids, all the great stuff. And then at night, they built a fire out on the field. It's a ranch. It's many, many dozens of acres of land. And then they built a fire at night, and then we all danced around the fire. People played guitars and tambourines, and girls were dancing. and we looked up in the sky. So the first night we looked up in the sky, my girlfriend Barbara and I, we looked up for hours and hours. Nothing happened. Fine. Next day, more panels, lectures, documentary films during the day. Another fire. We looked up in the sky hours and hours looking. The second night, absolutely nothing happened. Third night, the final day, we went more seminars and lectures. We looked up in the sky the third and final night. And I said to myself, I reached for my keys, Bob, in my pocket, my car keys. And I said, if I leave right now, I'll beat the traffic, because there were about 250 cars right there.
Yeah.
So I said to my girlfriend, if we leave now, we'll beat the rush. And no sooner did I say that than a black craft came over directly above us from nowhere. And it was impossible. People have asked me what shape it was. I have no idea. There's no way. It was black against the black sky. I don't know what shape it was. It was maybe 200 feet in the air. But it stopped directly above us, 250 people around this campfire.
Yeah.
And on the bottom of the craft was like a dome, and the dome lit up bright, dark emerald green color light. And this light went on and off above us maybe a dozen times, almost like Morse code. It was like, bright, and it lit up the whole ground. It's like from the X-Files. And I got the sense of, hello, we're here, we're in the neighborhood. Sorry, it took us 3 days. We know you've been waiting for us. Everything's cool. We love you. Be kind to one another. We're just flying through, and we thought we'd say hello. I mean, that's what the light was saying. And then it just stopped the light, and then just took off and vanished. So we cried. I mean, I cried. People were crying and laughing and kissing and dancing and hugging. And it was a spectacular moment, that third one. I still feel it in my heart. I can still feel whatever that was. I know that was not a Chinese weather balloon, Bob. That was something extraordinary. And I don't think that was human.
No, I don't think it was.
So
definitely.
The update to all this is, in 2017, my dad passed away. And I went to a restaurant to get a sandwich, and this is a true story. And I still can't believe it, but this is a true story. I went to get a sandwich, ordered my sandwich. I'm sitting, this is 3 days after my dad passed. And as I'm waiting for my sandwich, I got a beam of light or energy or something came from heaven into my brain and projected out through my eyes like this. The home movie of me and my dad from 1970 when I'm 14. And we saw the silver V in the sky. It played through my brain like it was a movie projector. It was the most remarkable thing that's ever happened to me. And I watched the whole scene. I saw the scene. And this is just, a few years ago. And I noticed that my dad looking at this craft like he knew what it was. And then the best part, Bob, was at the end, he goes, "Come on, kid, let's go home, my dad. Let's go home." And then he winked at me. My father winked at me. Keep that part in mind. Okay. Yeah. After my father died in 2017, I researched who he was because I didn't really know who my father was. He was a electronics engineer and a physicist for the United States Army. He invented, and I know this because I have documentation, he invented missile systems, radar systems, and military drones. He was involved with the earliest days of military drone technology. After he died, I called my mother and I said, "Did Dad ever talk about UFOs?" He worked for the Army for 45 years. She said in the early 50s, they took my dad into the vault at the Army base. Deep into the vault, they showed him something top secret. He came home, Bob. He was white and pale and shaking and nervous. And my mother said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "I saw something today I can never tell you or anyone about as long as I live." And he never did. My father never did. He never spilled that secret. So after I saw the whole movie in 2017 and I researched my dad, I realized whatever that silver V craft was, my dad knew what that was because he looked at it like he'd seen it 1,000 times. And when he winked at me, Bob, when he winked at me, my dad had top secret military clearance. He couldn't tell anybody. But when he winked at me, it was like a little tip of the hat to me. And then after he died, and I went to get a sandwich, and that event was beamed into my brain. I think that was my dad from heaven telling me, Danny, I couldn't tell you what I did my whole life. It was top secret. But now that I'm dead, here's a clue. This is who I am, and this is what I did. So that event in 2017 inspired me to write a book. My book is called After They Came. You can see the poster in the back there. And it's a fictitious book, but it's about a guy whose father worked for the government, and his father was friends with aliens. And the lead character doesn't realize who his father is until after his father died. So it's very similar and based on my life.
Yeah, because Alison's just, I've just clicked on it now. Was your dad an experiencer too?
Well, I see that. I believe, Alison Buttle, that my dad worked with I believe my dad helped to reverse engineer recovered UFO technology. That's what I don't think he ever met aliens. I don't think he met or worked with aliens. No. But I do believe, because everything my dad did was electronics. My father was an electronics genius. So I think what he was shown in the vault in the 50s was some recovered, maybe a UFO, a saucer, or some technology from the future. And they showed it to him. My father must have been blown away. According to my mother, my father was never the same again. After he saw that, he was never the same. So was he an experiencer with aliens? No. Did my dad, was he exposed to UFO technology? I truly believe that he was.
Right. I'll just get rid of that one. Got another one here. Another question. Has your son ever spoken to you about seeing anything since that night? Thanks.
Hi, Rebecca King. That's a great question. My son lives in Alaska. He's a very spiritual person. He, a few years ago, had an experience with his spirituality group. They were meditating in a dark room. And he told me that Jesus Christ came out of the closet in this room. Literally, Jesus came out of a closet and spoke to the 12 people in the room. And then jewelry, apparently, coins and jewelry came out of his mouth. And he left it behind. And then he went back in the closet, and they opened the closet afterwards, and no one was in there. So I don't know what that was. My son thinks it was Jesus. It could be an extraterrestrial, it could be an interdimensional being, it could be a ghost.
Yeah.
But my son swore to me, he said, Dad, I swear that happened. That really, really happened. And they thought it was Jesus. So I think that's a pretty good story.
It is. But saying that, I lived in a holiday camp. I'm just trying to think now, 17 years, 2003, 2004. And in middle of winter, there was nobody around me, anything like that. And I thought, God, I'm on my own. And felt like as though I've got no friends around me. There were only there's 250 chalets on the camp. And there were only 4 of us living on it in winter. And I'm sat there thinking, oh, I'm on my own. And Jesus came in front of me.
Really?
And it just materialized in front of me to say, you're not on your own, Bob. I'm here. And I looked and I thought, it can't be. And then I looked and then I turned my head, looked again, vanished. And since that day, when I were in that chalet for another 14 years, I never felt alone.
That's a wonderful story. I have a good friend who is a biblical scholar, and she studied in Israel. And about 25 years ago, she was in Israel. And one night she took a walk in Israel, and she got lost. And as she was lost trying to find her way back, she looked up and saw a figure approaching her, a man walking toward her. And he came to her, and she said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Yeshua. My name is Yeshua."
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
here to help you get back home. Yeshua is Jesus in Hebrew. And they spoke for a few minutes. He got her back home, then he left. A few years later, she had a near-death experience. I forget what it was, a medical problem, and she almost died from the surgery. And as she was recovering from the surgery, Yeshua, she said, was sitting in her hospital room holding her hand. So these are remarkable things that happen to special people. So I think your story, Bob, is really that's a great one, man.
Oh, yeah. I'd like to ask you about your book, After They Came. How
Sure.
did that come? How did that come about?
I wish I had it right here in front of me, but if you could see the poster in the back. So,
Yes.
so my dad passed. I went to get the sandwich. I saw that home movie, and that was 2017. The other part of that same story is after I ate my sandwich, I asked my waiter for a pen, and there was a paper placemat on the table in front of me. So I got a pen, and my hand started to write 3 sentences. My hand, it's called automatic writing. And the first sentence my hand wrote was, it said, write a book about benevolent aliens. That was the first thing. Write a book about benevolent aliens. The second thing was, lead character's father knew about aliens and UFOs. And then the third thing I wrote, Bob, was capital A, capital T, capital C. Those 3 capital, and then my hand stopped moving. This is true. My hand just stopped writing. So I looked, ATC. I had no idea what that was. What is that? What is that? And then I had the light bulb. I'm like, after they came, aliens, after they came, benevolent. Lead character's father knew about aliens and UFOs. I went home from the deli that I got that sandwich, and that's when I started writing my book that night. And that was 2017, 2018. It took me a while to get a publisher, but the book was published this past March. It's almost a year. It's from Genius Book Publishing. But because of the book, I have since befriended many of the top UFO researchers in the world. And some of them are good friends of mine now, because I went to a number of UFO conventions promoting the book. And the book changed my life. The book really changed my life. After they came. So tell all your friends, Amazon.com, After They Came, Dan Harari. Order the book, read the book, and let me know what you think of it.
But it makes you wonder. Sometimes when you're researching things, you think to yourself, did they want me to talk about it, about UFOs? There's only a certain few people what see things, other people who can't see. You might go on a Skywatch, and I'm saying, look at that up there, and they're going, where? I can't see, no, but you can. Do you get that sometimes then?
Here's what I think. It was after my dad passed, it was a confluence of paranormal things happened to me, right? Number one, I had that vision of that home movie from 47 years earlier that I forgot about. I saw projected through my own eyes a home movie from 47 years from my childhood. Okay, that alone is a paranormal situation, right? I would say that's a pretty good one. My automatic writing about the book. Now, I'm an author, but I had no intention of writing a UFO book. My first book was about my Hollywood career. I was going to write other stories about real life adventures. And when my hand wrote those words, I was like, well, clearly I have to write this science fiction book. So that was that. After my dad passed and I realized who he was, it opened me up to the possibility of the remarkable things he did with his career. And then I think, Bob, the 2008 sighting with the green light that touched me in my heart.
Yeah.
I think so. And I haven't figured this out yet, but I think they communicated with me like, hi, Dan. Hi, Dan. We're real. Okay. Let's call it just, hi, Dan. We love you. We're real. because when I was writing the book, I was feeling in my heart that 2008, that emerald green light. So I think that between my dad from heaven and the extraterrestrials who told me, I think my dad and the aliens told me to write this book because the book changed my life. In the last year, my life has been remarkably different than it was the 66 years before. So I think I've been touched or blessed or something from above. And I'm very grateful. Whatever it was, I'm very grateful.
Do you think you've had any missing time then?
That's a great question. People ask me that about the 1970 event. Um, I don't think so. I do not think so. Although, if my dad and I had missing time, we would have had it together. My dad never talked to me about that 70 sighting. I was a little kid. I was 13 and a half. I was into rock and roll. I just got my drum set. I'm a drummer. You can see back here.
Yeah, I
And
can see that there.
I was going to rock concerts with my friends and growing my hair long and playing the drums and looking at girls because I was too shy to talk to girls. I wasn't thinking I wasn't thinking about aliens and UFOs in 1970. So when we had that remarkable event, a couple days later, it was gone from I forgot all about it. It just breezed right through. It wasn't until my dad passed that it came back so vividly to me. So I don't know if I answered your question, but there you go.
Yeah, when you talk about your dad, does other people ask about your dad then after he's passed and say, did he tell you anything?
A couple of things. You know Richard Dolan, I'm sure, right?
Yeah,
Richard.
yeah, I do.
All
Yeah.
right. So I'm in a group. Well, okay. So Richard Dolan is a friend of mine now, and he and his wife Tracy Garbett. I told them about my dad. They want to interview me for an hour on their podcast and talk to me about my dad because they love the story about my dad. Um, Also, this is interesting. In July this year, you know Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm sure you know who he is.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
In July this year, Stephen Greer gave a press conference in Washington, D.C. It's a 3-hour event. It's on UFO TV, the streaming channel. That's where I watched it. It's a
Right.
3-hour
If anybody wants to listen.
event. During that presentation, Stephen Greer in July this year, he showed a chart of all the U.S. military bases that he has documentation about that worked on recovered UFO technology. Okay. My dad worked at Fort Monmouth in New Jersey for 45 years. In Dr. Greer's chart, Fort Monmouth, New Jersey was number 50 on his chart of 150 military bases.
Oh,
I printed that out, sent it to my mother, and I circled. I said, Mom, this proves that where Dad worked, they were looking at recovered UFO technology. So now I know for sure that that's what happened. But yeah, people talk to me about my dad. Yes.
I was going to say, I was just going to think, but Men in Black never come knocking at your door.
No, so, after my book came out, I was thinking, oh no, well, my book is fiction. How it is at the end, though, in the afterword section, I talk about my dad and the real things that happened with my dad. I was kind of expecting a knock on my door by now. Hasn't happened, but that's not to say it won't. But my dad worked there 1951 to 1996.
That's a long time.
But we're so many decades out from when he retired. We're 30 plus years out from when he retired. So I'm not expecting any Men in Black anytime soon.
No. Can you tell us about how you and Steve Bassett came to co-create the Hollywood Disclosure Allowance?
Sure. Well, that's part of the outgrowth of my book after they came. So it was published in early March. The first weekend in March this year was Alien Con in Los Angeles. So I had a booth at Alien Con in Pasadena, and I was selling my book and talking about my book at my booth. During that weekend, I met Georgios Tsoukalos, who I'd met earlier many times in the past. I gave him a copy. I met Eric Von Daniken. I met Paul Hynek, who's J. Allen Hynek's son. I met David Childress, and George Knapp, Jeremy Corbell. I met quite a few people, and I was giving them copies of my book. And some of them said, "Hey, can you sign it for me?" I said, "You want me to sign it for you?" Okay, because these are famous people, right? So I met quite a few people at that show. Then a few weeks later, in March this year, was UFO Con in San Francisco, and there I met Steve Bassett. And I just met him. My brother and I had gone there to that one together. I met him eating dinner. He was eating dinner with some friends. And I walked by. I said, "Hey, Steven, I'd like to give you a copy of my book as a gift." I gave it to him. And I said, "By the way, I'm a publicist in Hollywood. And if you're ever in LA, I'd like to hang." He goes, "Yeah, really?" He goes, "I'd love to hang with you." He gave me his card. That was in March. And at the end of May this year, he came to LA to visit some of his people, and we had lunch and in Hollywood. And at the lunch, Stephen looked at me, he goes, "Dan, I'm a UAP advocate and activist. You're a publicist. What can we do together?" And I just looked at him, Bob. I said, why don't we form the Hollywood Disclosure Alliance? I pulled it out of the air. I pulled that idea really out of the air. He looked at me. He goes, "That's perfect. Let's do it." We shook hands. So that was at the tail end of May. Then 2 days later, he and I went together to Contact in the Desert for that weekend in Palm Springs. Have you been to Contact in the Desert?
No, I haven't. No, I've heard it's good.
That's a very good one. That's a very good one. In fact, for next year, I'm the publicist for Contact 2024. But Stephen and I went together, and he introduced me to a lot of wonderful people there. That's where I met Richard Dolan. That's where I met Nick Pope. That's where I met George Noory. That's where I met Carolyn Corey. I met quite a few people there. And since that time, we just had this idea, let's create this group. So over the summer and early fall this year, we were thinking, well, we need a logo. We need a website. So my daughter's a graphic artist. She created the logo. She gave us a website.
Oh,
Stephen invited, Dolan and Nick Pope and Jason Martell and Carolyn Corey and Katie Page. And I invited Kathleen Martin, whose aunt and uncle were Betty and Barney Hill.
Right, yeah.
And Deborah Cobble, who was the inspiration for Bud Hopkins' book Intruders. So Stephen invited his people. I invited my people. And the idea of it's called HDA, Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. We launched on November 2nd with an event in Hollywood. We now have, Bob, we have about 100 people around the world who are members. And
Brilliant.
the premise is bringing UAP researchers and advocates and experiencers together with Hollywood producers and writers and performers, so they can share story ideas to help generate the next generation of UFO and ET related films and TV shows. It was my baby. It was my idea. It was my baby. I gave birth to it. It was an idea, and now it's a real thing. And anyone out there who wants to join, go to HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org, O-R-G, and you can read about us, and you can contact me. And if you're interested in becoming a member, you could let me know.
Sounds good, that does. I might even do that myself.
Yeah, sure. You should be.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting subject, is UAPs now. I think there's more people coming out now and saying, I have seen things, but I didn't want to talk about it earlier because they're getting ridiculed.
Absolutely right. Well, in the fall of 2017, the New York Times did a front page story that the military and the government had been investigating UFOs, in secret for many, many decades. Well past, they shut down Project Blue Book in 1970, but our government and our military never stopped looking at UFOs since 1970. They've been doing it all the way through since Roswell, if not before Roswell. So that New York Times article was like, hey, world, American military and government, they're still looking at this stuff. And that's when people started to come out to talk, slowly dripping. This past summer in June, David Grush appeared before Congress. It was televised, and he said, we have non-human entities, and we have off-world craft that are technology that is not from this world. He said live to national TV before Congress. And the sad thing was some media picked that up. Others were kind of like made it the sixth or seventh news story for the day. I live in LA, and Bob, the LA Times the next day on page 26, yeah, David Grush says there might be non-human beings. How is that not a page one art? How is that not the front page of every newspaper in the world?
We got nothing in the UK about that. Wasn't even written about it. Not even on any pages.
The media is not quite ready yet. They're becoming more open-minded about these articles. They're making fun of this less. There's less talk about little green men. That's less. That has been less the last few years. The New York Times has done a series of articles. The Washington Post, some respectable papers in the U.S., but it's still not. It's not front page. It's just not top of mind for people around the world. It's going to be. The name of my group is Hollywood Disclosure Alliance. Well, disclosure means the day the President of the United States goes before the TV cameras and tells the world extraterrestrials exist. We've known about them for 70 or 80 years, and it's been a top secret for military reasons all this time. But we felt the time was to come to share this information with you. That's what disclosure is. Steve Bassett and Danny Sheehan, a very famous attorney in Washington, the two of them have been meeting with Chuck Schumer in the U.S. Senate and with Tim Burchett in the U.S. House of Representatives to further any kind of congressional oversight for whistleblowers. And that's what they've been working on the past few months.
When you look back, the presidents must know what's happening, but are not allowed to say anything.
That is the common belief. Some presidents knew for sure. Truman knew. Okay, Roswell happened during Truman's era. Truman created a group called Majestic 12. Majestic 12 was, I believe, six military officers and six government officials, and their mandate was, what do we do with our what do we do with the Roswell craft? What do we do with the Roswell bodies? How do we handle this in the future? That's what Majestic 12 was. So Truman knew all about it. He had, when Roswell happened, the Air Force Base in Roswell sent out a press release that they'd recovered a flying saucer. That news ran all over the world. The next day, they said, oh, sorry, it was a weather balloon. We were wrong. No, they weren't wrong. Truman and his people called them and said, how dare you put that news out? That's not for you to decide. That's for the President of the United States to decide. So they had to eat that one. That's when the cover-up began. Truman knew. Eisenhower knew. There's stories. Even his granddaughter. There are stories of Eisenhower going on a craft at Alamogordo Air Force Base in the early 1950s for some time, and he apparently met with the aliens to create some kind of, we'll give you this, you give us this, we'll leave you alone if you do cattle mutilations, you give us some of your technology. People saw Eisenhower. There are eyewitnesses who saw him walk onto a flying saucer, and then maybe an hour later he came off of it. I think JFK knew because he was friends with James Forrestal. James Forrestal was Truman's Secretary of State or Defense, I forget. And James Forrestal wanted to tell the world aliens exist. He was the only one of the Majestic 12 who said, let's just tell everybody. And all the other 11 said, no, that's not going to happen. He was murdered. He was put into a crazy lunatic asylum and pushed out the window. He was murdered. James Forrestal was murdered. He was very good friends with JFK.
There's been
JFK,
a few people like that, Dan, aren't they? Who've been murdered and said, oh, they committed suicide.
that's one of the moves, apparently. Johnson, I'm sure knew. Nixon, I'm sure knew. After Reagan knew for sure.
Reagan, I'm
There's a
sure he
great
knew.
There's a great story. Steven Spielberg says he showed the movie E.T. to Reagan at the White House in 1982. Reagan was president. At the end of the movie E.T., Reagan stood up. There were maybe 50 people in the room. And Reagan said, there's only 2 or 3 people in this room right now who know that what we just saw on the screen is real. And Spielberg said he looked at Reagan and Reagan looked at him and he said Reagan was dead serious. He wasn't like winking or laughing. He was serious. Reagan knew. Bush Sr. knew. Bush Sr. was the head of the CIA for a while. Bush Sr. knew. Cheney knew. After that, it gets fuzzy. Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama.
What about Carter?
Well, he saw one.
That's right.
One. And Reagan saw 2. Jimmy Carter saw one. I don't think they shared it. He looked into it. They wouldn't tell him. Clinton looked into it. They wouldn't tell him. Obama, I believe they did not tell him. They tend to not share this with the modern day Democratic presidents. There's some rumors that Trump was told. I'm not sure about that. But not every president knows. Here's a good piece of information. Eisenhower wanted to visit Area 51 in the 50s, and they said, you're not welcome here. Can you imagine that? He was the president and said, you're not welcome. He won World War II. 5-star general. You're not allowed here. Don't come here. We won't let you in. So it's separate. It's separate from the president. Some know and some don't know.
What do you think aliens' agenda is then with Earth? Do they want to reside back here?
Well, there's so many different theories. I don't know if anyone really does know. Eric Von Daniken said they've been here for hundreds of thousands of years. They've been visiting a long time. I've had talks with people who think that they sent the asteroids here to kill the dinosaurs, which makes perfect sense. The dinosaurs were here for hundreds of millions of years or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden they left and then human beings showed up. There's only two options: God or extraterrestrials. If somebody got rid of the dinosaurs.
Dan, somebody was saying, but the aliens were here before the dinosaurs, and when something went wrong, all this the Earth was going to finish. They went off again, back to different planets.
You think so?
They want to come back to Earth.
Yes. That's for sure. They've been here a long time. There are people that think the pyramids in Egypt are maybe 2 million years old. And Egyptians think they're, 5,000 years old, maybe? There's a lot of disconnect. The extraterrestrials have been in and around the Earth for at least hundreds of thousands of years.
Oh, yeah.
They built a lot of the remarkable structures that still exist all over the world. Eric Von Daniken proposed that they blended their DNA with our early human ancestors, Neanderthal man, Cro-Magnon man, to create Homo sapiens, modern day man. I believe that. I truly believe that.
We could be part alien ourselves.
Yeah, there's a lot of human DNA. We don't know why. Our brains, I think humans use 7% of our brains. Well, that's 93% we're not using. That's because the aliens haven't told us what to do with it. They gave us these remarkable brains, but we're not, there are people that can do telekinesis or have psychic abilities. Well, those people are probably using 12% of their brains. But yeah, there's just so much unexplained about the human race and the Earth itself and the structures around the world. I mean, Moses parted the Red Sea. Did Moses part the Red Sea, or was there a craft above him? The very first page of my book is a quote from Exodus from the Hebrew Bible. And it says that there was a pillar of fire led the Israelites through the desert for 40 years so that they could travel safely. A pillar of fire. What is a pillar of fire? That's not the sun. It's not an airplane or a helicopter. There's no such thing. A pillar of fire is a UFO shaped like a cigar that traveled with the Israelites for 40 years. It's in the Bible. It's in Exodus. Okay. They parted the Red Sea. They gave Moses the 10 Commandments. When Moses saw the burning bush, that was it. That was a UFO. When Moses descended Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments, he was glowing. This is all in the Bible. So you gotta open your mind and your heart to these new ideas, but it's all there. It's just kind of cryptic. And when I learned all these things, I was in 2007 when I met Giorgio the first time. He told me, it just blew my mind. All this stuff just blows my mind.
I know. There's Nuke in the chat room said, and of course Reagan's alien threat speech.
Right, that's very, very famous. He spoke, I think it was in '87 at the UN. He said something like, I wonder what would happen I wonder if we would unite all the countries of the world if we were all facing a threat from not from this world. Reagan said that at the UN. Well, of course he knew. Of course he knew. He saw 2 UFOs. One, I believe, he was governor of California. He was in an airplane with his wife and some friends. They saw it. He told the pilot to try to follow it for a while. The other time he saw one, he had a party that weekend, and Shirley MacLaine went to the party, and she said Reagan was telling everyone he saw a UFO that few days before. Reagan knew. Reagan knew.
Alison just wrote something. I'll send it you. I think we lost a lot of knowledge through time.
Absolutely, Allison. Read Eric von Daniken's Chariots of the Gods. That's exactly what that book is about. He wanted to know, why were there petroglyphs all over the world depicting aliens? Why are there cave drawings? How was Stonehenge made? How are the pyramids in Egypt and South and Central America? How were they made? The statues on Easter Island, how on earth they're huge. How did they get there? There's a lot of knowledge there are gaps in humankind's knowledge, and extraterrestrial theory explains a lot of that.
When you spoke to your mother about it, what does she think about it now then?
My mother she thinks she goes, Danny, it's enough with the aliens already. It's enough with that's what my mother says. She doesn't think my dad knew anything about aliens or UFOs. And I said, Mom, what did he tell you about his job? She said, nothing. I said, exactly. He had top secret clearance. He didn't even tell my mother. He didn't tell me or my brothers or my mother for the entirety of his life. I said, Mom, he couldn't tell you. It would have jeopardized his pension. He would have been fired or thrown in jail or had his pension. My dad was all about his pension, man. My dad was not going to jeopardize his pension. I'll tell you that right now. So I have since shown her some of the documentation I have discovered about my father. And she goes, she's starting to think perhaps what I'm telling her is true. I said, Mom, I know it's true. You don't have to believe me. I said, I know in my heart it's true. He wasn't able to share this information with us. He wasn't allowed to.
No, because I think they do get told, but if you go against us, your family be at risk.
There are stories about members of the Roswell community. I think I believe it's the sheriff of Roswell, his daughter, for years said, because the sheriff brought some of the material home, and as did Jesse Marcel Sr. But the daughter of the sheriff said that Men in Black came to her house and sat down with her siblings and her mother and said, what your father told you never happened. No such thing. If any of you ever tell anyone about what you think happened, as long as you live, we'll take you out into the desert We have big shovels, and we'll take care of you. No one will ever see any of you ever again. She was like 9 years old at the time.
Oh, God.
So can you imagine how fearful you would be. You're not going to tell anybody about aliens and UFOs, certainly not in the 40s and the 50s. It's getting looser and better now. And we're hopeful that disclosure will happen in 2024.
Well, let's hope. Alison's just been writing again. And Trump made space police.
Yeah, hi, Allison. Allison, you're very cute, by the way. If you ever come to LA, give me. Isn't she? She's pretty.
Oh,
You're a
she
pretty girl.
is. She's good, is Ali.
Do you know her?
Yeah, I do. I've met her a few times. She comes to conferences.
Oh, Allison, come out to Contact in the Desert. I'll meet you. I'm the publicist for them next year. Palm Springs. Yeah, Trump made the space police.
so
Why did he do that? Well, apparently, I guess they told him, hey, aliens are real. Not, there are many different species of aliens. I think there's 150 species. Just like there's different races of mankind, there are different species of aliens. I'm told that maybe half are benevolent, the other half are not. And if Trump was told, that would explain the new space police force or space force. I think it's called Space Force. This is not, we already have protections against Russia and China. We're as strong against them as they might be against us. It's a tie. But if we're putting more money into outer space, it's so the reptilians don't come and eat us, kill us and eat us. So there are people that believe that Trump was told. So that's probably true.
do you think some of the crap what we see in the sky are some of ours as well as aliens?
No, I know for sure. For sure they are. Talk to Richard Dolan and talk to Michael Schratt. They could tell you about military man-made UFOs, military man-made craft that I believe started in the 50s. I think we started to have some of that technology in the 50s. I'm convinced what I saw with my dad in 1970 was military man-made craft. I didn't know it at the time, but I believe after he passed, I believe that I put that together. Some of what we see in the sky is just maybe natural anomalies or weird stuff that there's no explanation for. Some is man-made for sure, but I believe a solid third are extraterrestrial. Or there's a lot of talk now, Bob, about interdimensional beings. I think interdimensional explains a lot of things, including ghosts. I've had experiences with ghosts. My daughter has as well. Interdimensional would explain something appearing and disappearing. UFOs.
What about Bigfoot?
I haven't studied Bigfoot, although David Childress has an incredible book called Bigfoot in North America, which I have the best photos of Bigfoot I've ever seen. If you want to see photos of Bigfoot, it's David Childress has a book called Bigfoot in North America. And he goes back to like the 1880s. And he has the most remarkable photos of Bigfoot that you'll ever see in your life. If Bigfoot exists, I believe he was an experiment that the aliens created along the way when they were trying to create mankind. I think he was like an oops. He was like, well, we didn't do the right blend of alien DNA and Neanderthal man DNA. Maybe they messed up the formula. They created.
Do you think they're interdimensional then?
I've watched Expedition Bigfoot on TV a couple of years ago. Apparently, they vanish. They vanish. People will see something and hear them, and then it'll just go away and vanish. They have special abilities. If they exist, they have special abilities. I believe they were created by extraterrestrials as a mistake, and the fact that they've been hiding out for hundreds of years, and we've never caught one, and it's not on the front page of the New York Times. They're pretty clever. They're smarter than we are. There's never been a Bigfoot captured on CNN. We haven't seen it, but they exist. So they're very intelligent creatures, clearly.
Right, we're getting near the end of the show. I understand you're launching your own podcast on January the 11th. Tell us a little bit about that.
That is absolutely correct. So January 11th, it will be every Thursday night. Now, you're in the UK, so your people won't be up then, but it's going to be 10 to 11 p.m., 1 hour live Pacific time. That's 1 to 2 a.m. East Coast
That's
US
8
time.
hours,
So that'll be like
11, 7
yeah,
o'clock in the morning.
it's awfully early for you. That'll be awfully early,
Well, I'm
but
always up.
it's called Live from Hollywood. It's Paranormal Tonight. I'll be the host. My first guest is my friend Dee Wallace. Dee Wallace is a good friend of mine. She was the mom in the movie E.T. So if you remember
Oh,
the movie E.T., she was the mother.
I do,
She's a
yeah.
very So I figured starting out with the E.T.'s mom for my first show, that's a pretty good guest to
That
start
is
with,
good.
right? And it's on the UnX network. So it's the THE, the UN capital X, the UnX network on YouTube. So if any of your people listening go to the UnX network on YouTube, my show will be there. It's audio and video, just like we're doing now. Every Thursday, it'll be an hour live, and then after the live is done, it'll be archived. All my shows will be archived, and I have Nick Pope, Steve Bassett, Richard Dolan, Paul Hynek, Thomas Jane, who's a movie star, Dania Ramirez, who's a movie star. I have writers, directors, producers from the Hollywood side. I have
Brilliant.
a lot of top UFO names on the UFO side, and it'll be some of my best friends who've had weird experiences. It'll be fun. I think it'll be a lot of fun. I'm just doing it. I'm 67, Bob. I'm not ready to retire, and I have more.
No.
I have creativity in me, and it's just something I'd like to do. It's really not for money. It's just it's a hobby, and hopefully people will enjoy that show.
Alison just saying a brilliant show, Bob, she said. And she's just said to you, because I think you've been on Paul's show, Paul Sinclair's show. He said you have to get Paul on your show.
Yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. I did do Paul's show. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
it's
I'll
good.
make a.
I live in the same house as Paul.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we go
Oh,
together. He
oh.
lives in the bottom and I live in the top.
Tell him I said hello, would you?
I will do.
Yeah.
I was out with him on Saturday night. Sunday night we was investigating, and we did a little message for all his listeners.
That's great.
It's on Paul's page and it's on my page. I'll send it to you. We did a little podcast outside, wishing everybody a Merry Christmas and where we were at, and it was quite funny.
That's that's great.
What's your email address if anybody wants to get in touch with you?
Sure. So the best way to get to me now is HDA at HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. HDA at HollywoodDisclosureAlliance.org. That's the main email for my UFO group. I check those emails every day. And people from all over the world have been writing to me the last few months. So that's the best way to
Oh,
go.
brilliant. I'll have to come on your show as well. I can talk about Men in Black.
Yeah, well then, we'll reverse it, Bob, right? You do me a favor, I'll do you one.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been interesting. Everybody's enjoyed it.
Thank you. That's very, very sweet. And tell Allison I want to show her around Los Angeles when she's out.
She says, where is she? She said something about, I'm flattered. Thank you.
Oh, that's very sweet. Yeah. Yeah, tell her I've been here 43 years. I know LA like the back of my hand, so I'll show her around. All right, Bob. Thanks for everything.
Diane's just come in and said, Diane's just in chat room, says, thank you, Bob and Dan. Great show tonight. And good night, all.
Very sweet. Happy New Year to everyone. And hopefully 2024 is the year of disclosure. That's what I'm thinking and wishing for.
Oh, yes. Oh, God, yeah. Right, my guest on Friday is Barry R. Frankish, paranormal investigator, ghost hunter, and does many hauntings. He's on Friday the 29th, 3 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Pacific, and 8 p.m. in the UK. I'd like to say thank you, everyone. Thank you to everybody in the chat room who gets questions out there for Dan to answer. It's been
Thank
good.
you.
It's always nice when there's some new people come in chat room as well, besides Alison and Diane, Stargazer, UK. There's been quite a few in there tonight as well. Yeah, there's been quite a few in there tonight. So thank you again. Anyway,
Thank you.
you
Happy New
take
Year,
care.
everyone.
Have a lovely week.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
Happy New Year
Take care,
to you
Bob.
too. I don't see you
Thank you.
before.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Take care,
Thank
won't
you.
you?
You too, man.
And maybe I'll come on your show.
I'll put it down. I'll put it down. I have a lot of people to do, every Thursday night for the next 5
Paul's
years.
name down as well.
I will. I'll write you down. Thanks, you guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. You take
Bye.
care. Thank you again for coming up.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Linda.